guys, welcome in. Adam here with Alesis Drums, and in this video I'm going to show you how to quickly set up your new Strata Core E-Kit. Now we all know that drummers have personal preferences for things like drum angles and cymbal heights. Many of us will have constraints on how much space that we have for our drums. There is no perfect way to set up an E-Kit for everyone. Now this is especially true for the Strata Core, because this kit can be used as a compact practice solution, a studio workhorse, and even a gigging setup. With these different use cases in mind, I invite you to join me on this setup guide as I cover the fundamentals of building out the Strata Core while taking note of some details that apply specifically to this kit. We're going to ensure that every drummer watching this video ends up with a comfortable setup that's ready to play. And for my seasoned players, stick around until the end of this video where I've got a few unique tips for you, including 3 different ways to mount your core module and a really cool hack for getting your toms in the perfect position on this kit. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Let's quickly cover all of the components that are included with your Strata Core. I highly recommend getting everything unboxed and organized before getting started, as this will make it much easier for you to keep up with this video as we go along. First up, grab all of your black bars, clamps, and mounts and keep these in one place. When assembled, these will create our drum rack. Along with these black components, we also want to set aside our 3 silver L-rods, which are used to mount the toms, and these 3 metal boom arms, which are for our cymbals. Now we also have an included snare stand, but that's a freestanding component and it's not physically connected to the rack, so no rush on setting up that snare stand for now. And we have our 4 drum pads, including one 10-inch floor tom, 2 matching 8-inch rack toms, and our 12-inch snare drum. For cymbals, we have 4 pads in total, our 12-inch arc hi-hats, 2 matching 12-inch crashes, and one 14-inch ride. Inside of the 12-inch hi-hat box, you'll also find this component, which is our magnetic hi-hat controller. Keep this near your 12-inch hi-hats, along with the included hi-hat clutch, and we'll mount all of these components together on our hi-hat stand later in this video. And of course, we have the Strata Core drum module. Look at that touchscreen, gorgeous. We'll talk much more about this module in future videos, but for now, set this aside along with your wiring harness, your power adapter, and all of the Velcro cable ties that are included. And finally, we have our 8-inch mesh kick tower, which is one of the last components that we'll put on the kit. Set this near the kick pedal that you plan to use in your full setup. And lucky for us, we can assemble the entire Strata Core with only one tool, a drum key. Now, Alesis has put one in the box for you, but we all know you're going to lose that drum key before this video is over. So grab a spare drum key if you have one lying around. And now that we have all of our Strata Core components unboxed and organized, let's get this thing put together. To begin assembling the rack, start by laying out the 4 largest black poles, which will all have feet on them. We'll lay these out parallel to each other on the floor, and we want to make sure that they're in a specific order. From left to right, we have a single clamp on our first leg, 2 clamps on our second leg, 2 clamps on our third leg, and another single clamp on our last leg. From left to right, we'll call these A, B, C, and D, respectively. You'll also hear me refer to these as the inside legs or the outside legs. Legs A and D, or the outside legs, can be briefly set aside for now. We're going to start by attaching legs B and C to each other with a curved black crossbar. Don't worry about which of the 3 crossbars you grab, they are all identical on the Strata Core. Start by rotating legs B and C so that these mounts at the top are facing each other, and loosen these mounts with your drum key. Then insert the ends of a crossbar into these mounts. To ensure that the crossbar is seated all the way inside the mount, just rotate the bar and add a little pressure until the grooves are aligned. You'll feel when the crossbar pops into place. Repeat this for both sides, and then tighten the mounts back down with your drum key. Now you'll see that each mount also has 2 wing nuts. These wing nuts are used to adjust the overall height of the crossbar on the legs. If you're on the shorter side, you can loosen these wing nuts on both mounts and slide that crossbar lower on the legs. If you're on the taller side, keep these mounts towards the tops of the legs. For reference, I am 5 feet 11 inches tall, and I leave about 3 inches of leg sticking out through these mounts for my ideal setup. And this is also an important design theme to take note of in the Strata Core. We use our drum key to secure the crossbars to the mounts, but we use the wing nuts to adjust the height of those crossbars on the legs. The drum key is only necessary for a total disassembly of the kit. Next up, let's loosen the mounts here, just a few inches below our top mounts. Just as before, we'll use our drum key to loosen these, so our crossbars can be inserted into these mounts. Now we also want to loosen the wing nuts on these mounts because we're going to rotate them to face outside of the rack. Now, grab your 2 remaining curved crossbars and insert them into the mounts that we just loosened and rotated outwards. Make sure that the curvature of these crossbars matches the curvature of that middle crossbar that we last installed. Now, with your A and D legs hopefully still nearby, go ahead and stand this structure upright. We can now insert the ends of our crossbars into the mounts of legs A and D. This will allow our rack to stand up on its own. But before you tighten all of your wing nuts back down, take a moment to ensure that each crossbar is level to the ground. Remember, the mounts can slide around the legs if you haven't tightened these wing nuts down. And it's totally fine if your 3 crossbars are at different heights from each other, but they still need to be level against the ground for maximum stability. And finally, we need to install this chunky little bar onto our A leg, which is where we will later mount our core module. Just slide this mount over top of the A leg farthest to your left, and then tighten it back down. Now, before we move on, we're looking for 3 things in our rack's structure. The ends of each crossbar should be fully seated within their mounts. Each crossbar should be level to the ground, no matter how high or low it is. And finally, all 4 legs should be touching the ground without any wobble. If you do see any wobble in your rack, it's likely due to a crossbar that is not perfectly level with the ground. If you can check all 3 of these boxes, then simply tighten down all of your screws and wing nuts, and you will have a very sturdy rack that is ready for mounting drums. Let's start out by mounting our 2 8-inch rack toms to our center crossbar. To do this, grab 2 of your L rods and 2 of these black clamps. Now we have several of these clamps and they all get mounted onto our crossbars, but on each one we have 2 wing nuts, a big one and a small one. So we're going to loosen the big wing nut here until the clamp opens up, and then we can wrap it around our center crossbar. If you're seated at the drum set, you'll see the smaller wing nut is oriented underneath the crossbar and facing towards the left side of the kit, with the big wing nut on top facing the ceiling. Now repeat this for your second tom clamp. Now, grab your L rods and insert the black plastic portion into the open holes of these clamps, which will be underneath your crossbar. You might have to loosen the smaller wing nut on the clamp to do this. Once the L rods are inserted from the outside of the crossbar, make sure that the silver portion of the L rod is facing the ceiling, and then tighten them back down with the smaller wing nut here. For our 10-inch floor tom, we'll just repeat this process on the right side crossbar. Open up a clamp with the big wing nut, wrap it around your crossbar, make sure that that smaller wing nut is underneath the crossbar and facing left. Insert that last L rod from the outside of the rack and point the silver bar towards the ceiling. Then tighten everything back down. Now once we're here, it's very easy. We just grab our drums, loosen the wing nut on the drum itself, and we can lower our drums respectively onto each of these 3 L rods. If you run into a crowding issue with your toms, you can loosen the clamps on your crossbar and slide them around to make some space. If you notice any of this side-to-side tilting, double check that you've tightened the smaller wing nut on the bottom of the clamp. This will keep your L rod oriented vertically, and it'll prevent your drums from tilting side to side when you play. From here, I would recommend that you put your snare drum on its stand and take a moment to adjust the heights and angles of your 4 drums. Of course, you can do this at any point in time, but it's a lot easier to make these tweaks before we have cables plugged into the drums. Once your drums positions feel good, make sure that all of your wing nuts are tightened down, your drums feel secure, and now we're ready to mount our cymbals. To mount our cymbals to the rack, let's grab our last 3 black clamps and our 3 metal cymbal arms. Now, these are the same clamps that we use to mount our drums, but to mount the cymbal arms, we're going to orient these clamps a little bit differently on the crossbars. Just as before, we'll open up the clamp with our bigger wing nut and wrap it around the crossbar, but when we tighten this clamp down, we want the bigger wing nut to be facing towards the drummer. This orientation gives us an open hole that now faces the ceiling, and this is where we'll drop in our metal cymbal arms. Now technically, you can mount your cymbals anywhere you'd like on your 3 crossbars. For me, I like to mount my left side crash off of the center crossbar all the way to the left side, though it'll also work just fine if you place it here on your left crossbar. Our other two cymbals can be mounted on the right crossbar, one for your ride and one for your right crash. These mounts can easily be moved later on if you change your mind, and a lot of these positions will come down to personal preference. Once our 3 clamps are in place with the open holes facing the ceiling, we'll drop in our metal cymbal arms into these 3 clamps and tighten them down with the smaller wing nuts. Next, open up the cymbal arms all the way, and remember that you can make use of the boom arm if you need to. Now, remove these triangular cymbal nuts and felt pads from the tops of each cymbal arm and set them aside. We will need these soon, so keep them nearby. Now, just grab your cymbals and drop them onto the cymbal arms. The cables coming from the core module are long enough to reach any cymbal configuration that you come up with, so take a minute to get your cymbals in the perfect position here. I happen to like my ride cymbal very high, sitting way above my second rack tom, but it's totally fine if you'd prefer a crash cymbal in this position, with your ride mounted farther over to the right side of the kit. Again, all personal preference. Once your 3 cymbal pads are on the cymbal arms, we can then reinstall our felts and secure them down with our triangular toppers. While doing this, remember that all cymbals are supposed to move, even on e-kits, so tighten your cymbals down enough to keep them secure, but a little bit of wiggle room is perfectly normal. Last up, we have our hi-hats. Grab your hi-hat stand and remove the clutch so that the hi-hat seat and the pull rod are fully exposed. If your hi-hat has a tilter like this one, make sure that it is completely unscrewed. A perfectly flat or a level hi-hat will always provide the best response. Now, grab your magnetic hi-hat controller, making sure that this port is oriented towards the floor. Slide the controller over the pull rod and lower it onto the hi-hat seat. Next, grab the included hi-hat clutch and install it onto your 12-inch arc hi-hats, and I recommend that you tighten down the clutch very well onto the hat so that there's no wiggle room or sloshing. Then, place the arc hi-hat and clutch over the pull rod just like an acoustic kit. Later in this video, we'll discuss calibrating the hi-hat, which is done through the core module, but we're not quite there yet. Alright, that is it for cymbals. If your cymbal positions feel good and everything is tightened down, let's move on to our kick tower. Okay, so our rack is sturdy, our drums and cymbals are mounted to the rack, and now it's time for some low end. The Strata Core's 8-inch mesh kick tower sits right underneath your middle crossbar, but like any floor component of a drum set, this can be notorious for sliding. To keep the kick tower from running away from you, we only need to do 2 things. First, take a look at the back of your kick tower and locate these 2 screws on the bottom plate. From the factory, these screws will be loose so that the spikes on the bottom aren't exposed, but we need these spikes to grip our carpet. You can tighten these down by hand, but they are spring-loaded, so you might need to use a Phillips head screwdriver to fully expose the spikes. And if you have any desire to maintain a healthy relationship with your mom or your spouse, please make sure that you don't use these spikes on a hardwood floor. Now, to really keep the kick tower in place, we also need to rely on our pedal. No matter what kick drum pedal you're using, make sure that the pedal itself is clamped firmly to the kick tower's plate, like you can see here. Most pedals will have stopping spikes of their own, which help to keep a tight grip on the carpet and prevent sliding. And 2 more quick tips for the Strata Core kick tower. Number 1, use a beater with a hard surface. Plastic or wood works great, but try to avoid felt, as this can cause some unnecessary wear on the mesh head, and it won't provide an optimal trigger response. And finally, for all my double bass players, make sure that both of your beaters are centered on the kick tower itself. The 8-inch mesh pad has plenty of surface area for virtually any double pedal setup, but the placement of those beaters matters. Take a moment to make sure that your beaters are evenly spaced, and you'll be good to go. Now let's install our module. Start by finding your wiring harness and plugging it into the underside of your core module. Now this connection isn't solid just yet, but we're going to make use of a very unique clamp that looks like this, and this clamp will help us secure the core's cable connection. So take this clamp and pass the wires coming out of your wiring harness through the cutout like so. Once everything is aligned, tighten these 2 silver screws by hand onto the clamp, and that will secure the clamp to the bottom of the module. You'll also notice that as you tighten down these screws, you're also tightening the wire harness's connection to the module, 2 birds with 1 stone. Once this connection feels good, loosen the wing nut on the underside of the core module's clamp, and we can now slide the module onto this pole here. From our rack assembly, this shorter pole should be mounted on the top of our far left leg or the A leg. If you stick around to the end of this video, I'll show you a couple other unique ways that we can mount our module using this shorter leg. So from here, you'll be left with a big bunch of cables hanging off of the back of your module. Now, there is no specific formula for how to run eDrum cables, but if you're new to this process, I would recommend slowly working from the left side of the kit to the right side of the kit, keeping the cables as neat as possible as you go. Make sure to leave just a little bit of slack in your cables as well, in case you want to later move your drums or cymbals after everything is plugged in. You'll find many included Velcro straps to stay organized, and each cable is color-coded and labeled for your convenience. Now, if you've noticed the absurdly detailed cable organization that's shown in some shots throughout this video, know that doing that is a completely optional use of your time. Part of my job is to make drums look pretty on camera, but for many drummers, this is beyond overkill. But for those interested, I am planning to do a breakdown of this cabling method, along with some other approaches to eKit cable management. Keep an eye out for that video right here on the Alesis YouTube channel in the near future. Now, in the intro of this video, I mentioned that we would close out with some unorthodox setup tips for the Strata Core. Since we just discussed mounting the module, let's start there. Here are two alternative ways to mount your module, which can be super useful in specific situations. First, we can reduce the core's footprint by bringing our module inside of the A leg as opposed to the outside. If we flip the orientation of the core's module on this pole, we can now swing the module inside to the right side of the A leg. To fit the module here, you have to either raise your hi-hats so that the module can fit underneath the hats, or just slide your hi-hat stand a little bit further forward. This instantly makes the overall footprint of the kit much smaller, and it's a great way to save space. Another unique mounting position is here off of the B leg. This one is tricky because you'll need the top of the B leg to be exposed so that our clamp can fit above the crossbar. But with a few tweaks, we can now position our core module underneath our left side crash in between the hi-hats and the rack tom. This is likely the most compact way to set up the Strata Core, assuming that you still feel comfortable with the placements of your drums and cymbals. So let's keep the setup hacks rolling. Now, when I set up eKits, I sometimes struggle to get my drums in the perfect position. And really, it's just the drum rack that can make this difficult because all of our components are physically connected to one another when we use a rack. But the way Alesis has designed their drum racks actually provide us with a few other options. So check this out. In this mounting position, the only way that I can bring my floor tom closer to me is by bringing the right crossbar inward. But this also brings my cymbals closer to me, which isn't what I'm trying to do. So in this scenario, I can actually flip the orientation of the floor tom's mount. So instead of this L rod being on the outside of the crossbar, we can mount it on the inside. This brings the tom much closer to me, and I haven't moved any other part of my setup. And you can do this for all three toms. Flipping our L rod to the other side of the crossbar gives us an extra several inches of range without moving the rack itself. But wait, there's more. Bringing the L rods to the opposite side of the crossbar gives us freedom to move the drums closer to us or further away from us. But what about the drum's height? The core's L rods have a limited height range. We can slide all the way to the top of the L rod like this, or all the way to the bottom. But if we want to go any higher or lower, we have to move the crossbar. So here's the hack. If we remove our floor tom and loosen the L rod, we can actually flip the L rod upside down. Now our drum can be mounted from the bottom, which lets us hang our drums beneath the crossbars instead of floating above them. And yes, this works on every tom. If there's an L rod being used, you ultimately have three ways that you can mount a drum. Outside of the crossbar with the L rod facing up, inside the crossbar with the L rod facing up, or inside of the crossbar with the L rod facing down. And if you want to make playing drums way harder for no reason, you can even try this one. Very acid jazz. Now, before I let you go, there's two more things we want to do, the first of which is hi-hat calibration, and that is super easy on the core module. To calibrate the hi-hats, just power up your core module and tap on the trigger icon from the home screen. Then tap Hi-Hat Setup in the top right corner. Here, you'll be prompted to loosen your clutch and let the hats freely sit in their lowest position on the hi-hat controller. Then, just touch the Set button, and now we can set our clutch position. Once your clutch is dialed in and tightened, take your foot off of the hi-hat pedal and then press Finish. Our hats are now calibrated. Now let's imagine that you're on a gig and your clutch position slips. You can quickly adjust your hi-hat sensors on the home screen with this calibration knob. By adjusting the hi-hat's bottom position, we can quickly correct our hi-hat's calibration, and this can be a lifesaver in a live situation when you don't have 30 seconds to calibrate your hi-hat mid-song. And finally, before you grab your drumsticks, make sure to find your drum key and tighten down all of the mesh heads. These heads are left fairly loose during shipping, but when we tighten them down, the core has a much more realistic feeling. Just give each lug a half turn to the right, using a star pattern across the drum to ensure that the tension is increased evenly. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching this setup tutorial, guys. Adam here with Alesis Drums, and I will see you in the next one.